My name's Rick Danner. I'm just a guy with a dog, a hanger, and a habit of keeping an eye on the skies, even when nobody's looking up anymore. If this is your first time stumbling across this signal, don't expect music, don't expect official instructions, and sure as hell don't expect calm. I'm not the Coast Guard. I'm not military. I'm not one of those survivalists with a bunker and 20 years worth of dehydrated stew. I'm a former aviation tech from Gander, Newfoundland. I fly a '79 Cessna 172, I run a ham radio in my garage, and I happen to be in the wrong place at exactly the right time to see what's coming. And if you're hearing this, I suggest you stay inland and keep climbing. This didn't start today, not really. It didn't even start this week. But something happened 3 days ago that tipped everything off balance. I was out on a routine morning check. Nothing unusual. Weather had been weird for a few weeks. Yeah, but nothing that set off alarms. Late winter warmth. Thick humidity that didn't belong up here. Fog rolling in from the Atlantic earlier and earlier every day. That morning, I took the Cessna up for a low-altitude pass over the shoreline. Coastal patrol is something I do out of habit more than anything else. I've been logging flight hours for 20 years, and when I see something strange out on the water, I pay attention. That day, about 12 miles off the coast near Cape Friels, I spotted it. Not a boat, not ice, movement. Something massive was disturbing the water, not breaking the surface, but pushing beneath it like the ocean had a pulse. The patterns were wrong. These weren't swells. They were directional, intentional. A long, rolling pressure that looked like the sea was holding its breath. I circled twice, snapped some pictures, and made a note to check the buoy readings later. I didn't like what I saw. When I got back on the ground, I called Tom Miller. He's one of the field techs at the Goose Bay NOAA Relay, and a good man to have on speed dial. He runs diagnostics on seismic monitors and oceanographic equipment, the kind of tech that hums quietly in the background until the world decides to throw a tantrum. He picked up on the first ring, which never happens. Said they'd picked up an underwater quake off the southwest coast of Greenland earlier that morning. A 7.6 on the moment magnitude scale, which doesn't sound devastating until you factor in depth and placement. This one hit right near the base of the Helheim Glacier, which has been teetering on collapse for years. More alarming than the quake itself was what followed. 2 of their deep-sea sensors went offline within minutes. No warning, no fade-out, just a hard blackout. He mentioned pressure readings, so out of range, they had to be rechecked by hand. One buoy detected a sudden vacuum, followed by a forward surge of displacement that didn't match any model. And then, silence. Now, I'm no geologist, but I've spent enough time over the Atlantic to know the difference between odd weather and a body blow to the ocean floor. Something tore loose down there, something big. And when that kind of mass moves beneath the ice, the consequences aren't local. Still, there was no news, no alerts, nothing on the weather net. Just that humid fog and a bunch of disconnected noise on the amateur bands. You can always tell when something's wrong before the officials say it. People stop talking about politics and start asking each other, "Are you seeing this too?" By nightfall, Reykjavik's broadcast relay had gone intermittent. The Icelandic coast was dealing with their own storm surge issues. Rumors started spreading about a deep calving event, a full ice shelf shearing off below the waterline, sending shockwaves outward. A collapse like that wouldn't make the news right away. Too much at stake. Too many ports. The next day, I saw something I won't forget. I took Watson, my dog, out early in the morning. He's a mutt, mostly husky with some Labrador, and an uncanny sense for changes in the weather. He'd been restless all night, pacing near the garage door. When I opened up to prep the plane, he bolted straight to the edge of the field and wouldn't stop staring toward the shoreline. I followed his gaze. The sea looked empty, like someone had drained the coast. Where the beach normally met the tide, there was now 100 yards of exposed seabed. Fish flopped helplessly in the mud. Crabs scattered through drying kelp. That's when I smelled it. Salt, rust, and something sharp like heated metal. I radioed Tom again. His voice was tight. He'd been tracking anomalies for the last 36 hours, and it wasn't just Newfoundland. Pressure bands across the North Atlantic were showing erratic pulses. The water was being displaced, but not all in one direction. It was like the basin was breathing in slow, terrible gulps. Then came the report from an offshore drilling platform east of Greenland. One of the engineers caught it on a backup link before the feed went dead. A massive chunk of glacial shelf, roughly the size of Manhattan, that had broken away below the surface. No above-water detachment. No slow melt. Just gone. The collapse triggered a vertical thrust of water, the kind that doesn't rise gently. It rises with violence. And that's where we are now. I'm broadcasting from the hangar with the mobile transmitter rigged to an auxiliary battery. We've already lost 2 towers along the coast, one at Cape St. George, the other outside Lumsden. Local air traffic has gone silent. The signal out of Halifax stopped relaying at 14:42 Eastern. No tsunami warnings. No official statements. But I don't need to see the government feed to know what's coming. What's headed our way is not a regular wave. It's not a single crest followed by foam and silence. This is a mass displacement event, a dome of water forced outward by a subglacial collapse and a seafloor fracture. The speed of it varies by depth, but make no mistake, when it hits continental shelf, it will climb. Higher than our buildings, faster than our vehicles, stronger than any seawall ever built. If you're anywhere along the Atlantic Rim, listen carefully. Evacuation isn't optional. Don't wait for sirens or televised maps. Head inland, get to high ground and stay there. Bring water. Bring tools. Bring radios. I've loaded the Cessna with gear, transceiver, extra fuel, and backup batteries. I'm going up again. I don't know if I'll make it back. But if I can stay ahead of the wave, I can keep the signal alive. I've got enough altitude to link with the northern relay net toward Labrador and possibly pick up contact with ham operators in Quebec if they're still transmitting. Watson's coming with me. He's sitting in the co-pilot seat now, ears perked, eyes steady. He knows. Dogs always know. I'll broadcast as long as I can. I'll try to describe what I see from above. If the wave's visible from altitude, I'll log its speed and direction. If not, I'll tell you what isn't there anymore. I'm circling east by northeast, about 2,500 feet up, keeping just below the cloud deck for now. The visibility out here is patchy, but I've got line of sight across the bay, and the weather is holding steady for the moment. Watson's tucked in quiet beside me, seatbelt over his harness, eyes fixed on the side window. If you're just now catching this signal, it's real. The collapse is real. The surge is coming, and it may already be past some of you. I want to use this segment to share what I know so far. Not just what I've seen, but what I've heard from others. People on the water, people underground, people who got one last message out before the feed went cold. Let's start with the official line. About 40 minutes after I got airborne, a general emergency message finally came through on the maritime band. Not from the Canadian government, not from any provincial agency. It came out of Norfolk, Virginia, U.S. Naval Oceanographic Office. The alert was brief, monotone, obviously automated. I wrote it down as it played. This is a priority warning. A major glacial displacement event has been detected near the Greenland shelf. All vessels in the North Atlantic region must seek immediate shelter or head west. Avoid low-lying coastal zones. Extreme oceanic disturbance is expected. Further information to follow. And then silence. No maps. No projected landfall. No estimated impact times. Just that. It was followed about 20 minutes later by a weird update from Transport Canada, not even on the usual alert band. They issued what they called a voluntary maritime disengagement order. That's not even a term I'd heard before. Apparently, it means get off the water if you can. But we're not officially declaring a state of emergency. Let me tell you something. If a 7.6 quake cracks the base of a glacial shelf, and no one's giving precise evacuation orders, it means one of two things. Either they don't have enough information to make the call, or they know what's coming, and they've already pulled their own people back. I'm not the only one who's been transmitting. I've picked up half a dozen civilian ham relays between here and New Brunswick, some of them barely holding signal, but they're out there. One guy, Roger McIntyre, out of Souris, has been logging distress calls from private vessels all morning. He picked up an emergency signal from a Danish research submersible 3 hours ago. Let me say that again. A submersible. This thing was apparently part of a joint research mission that had been tracking deep ice formations under the Petermann Glacier. It was a 2-person crew with a surface support ship somewhere north of Jan Mayen Island. According to the log, they were underneath the shelf at the moment of collapse. They never made it back up. Roger said the signal was corrupted, glitching in and out, but the transcript was chilling. The last clear message received from the crew was, "It didn't break naturally. It was forced apart from beneath. There was pressure, like something was moving under the ice, pushing upward. We can see." Then static. Then 5 seconds of high-frequency squeal. Then nothing. Their support ship, the Schofalken, never responded to repeated pings. That entire sector has gone dark. Now, I don't go in for conspiracy theories, but I've worked on radar systems, sonar buoys, even dropped hydrophones off my own plane when I used to map fish migration. The ocean talks, if you know how to listen. And lately, it's been loud. There have been weird acoustic signatures recorded off the shelf edges going back 3 months, long, low tremors deep in the water column. Not tectonic, not mechanical, almost rhythmic. I first heard about them on a small oceanic forum I follow. Bunch of nerds who track hydroacoustic data. Most wrote it off as subglacial shifting. But now I'm not so sure. A British seismic research vessel, the Sextant, made a report 2 weeks ago before docking in Reykjavik. Their lead tech, a woman named Ellie Brennan, posted a private forum message the night before they went dark. I managed to dig it up. She wrote, and I'm quoting, "We're detecting harmonic interference under Helheim. It's not tectonic and doesn't correlate with meltwater flow. Something massive is pressing upward, something with inertia." That was her last post. Her account hasn't been accessed since. Now let me be clear. I don't believe in sea monsters or ancient horrors or whatever Reddit's cooking up right now. I'm a pilot. I believe in lift, thrust, pressure, and signal strength. But the thing is, if something shifted beneath the glacier, something solid, massive, with more force than melting ice alone, then we're not just dealing with water. We're dealing with momentum, the kind you can't reverse once it's moving. From up here, I can see the beginnings of it now, off the east horizon, about 40 miles out. The fog bank is still heavy, but the edges are beginning to churn. There's motion under it, not like waves, but like something is lifting the whole surface from below. It's slow, but it's growing. The land ahead of me, Terra Nova National Park, the far inlets west of Bonavista Bay, they're calm for now, still quiet. But it's a dead quiet. No boats, no birds, no motion. That's not right. I'm going to begin a slow bank west and climb to 4,500 feet. I want to keep this transmission steady. The higher I go, the more range I can push through the old repeater network out of Deer Lake. I've still got 2 functioning relays in the avionics compartment, and a line-of-sight booster mounted on the left wing. If any of you are still along the coast, Halifax, Boston, Portland, Bar Harbor, do not trust the quiet. Even if it seems still, even if the tide looks normal. The surge isn't always obvious at first. Tsunamis don't always look like waves. Sometimes they look like the ocean falling away from you. Sometimes it starts with silence and ends with thunder. To the crew of the Schofalken and the submersible beneath Petermann, if by some miracle you're still out there, if you're drifting or rising or even stuck in some air pocket under the ice, know that your last words made it to someone. And to Ellie Brennan, wherever you are, if your signal comes back online, I'll be listening. I broke through the leading edge of the fog bank about 20 minutes ago, and I wish I hadn't. I've been flying over this part of the ocean for the better part of 30 years. I know how water moves, how swell looks from above, how storm surge builds in layers, how waves roll and fold and die out over time. What I saw just east of the Bonavista Peninsula wasn't a wave in any traditional sense. It wasn't rolling. It was climbing. Picture the sea rising as one solid mass, slow and smooth like a tide coming in all at once. But it's not local tide water. It's a shelf, wide, heavy, relentless, and it's being pushed by something thousands of miles behind it. I marked the crest visually against a communications tower near Port Union. At altitude, with decent contrast, you can spot it even through atmospheric distortion. That line, that gentle curve, it's not a cloud shadow. It's water, and it's lifting. The swell is miles wide. You can't see the bottom of it because it's not breaking yet. There's no foam, no crashing front, just a wall of slow motion, like the ocean forgot how to stop. That fog I mentioned earlier, it's not weather fog, it's sea vapor. A fine aerosol layer thrown into the air by the friction of water pressing against itself. You only get that in high-energy collisions. The water's tearing through its own mass. I've received at least 3 shortwave relays confirming what I'm seeing. One from a Coast Guard auxiliary vessel near the Georges Bank shelf break, another from a tanker attempting to reroute toward the Azores, and one chilling report from a sailboat roughly 70 miles off Cape Breton. That last one, they saw the line coming. They described it as the sky meeting the sea, in a shape that doesn't belong. They tried to turn inland, but the wave reached them within minutes. Their last transmission ended with the words, "We're not climbing it, it's climbing over us." Since then, I've heard only the squelch of silence from that frequency. I'm keeping the Cessna at lean burn now to conserve fuel. I've got one more full tank in reserve, but I need to stretch my range if I plan on reaching the higher valleys near Red Indian Lake. That's the backup plan. If the relay tower outside Pasadena holds, I'll try to land near the service road and rebroadcast from the ground. For now, I'm watching the coastal edge disappear. Looking down, I can see the first visible signs of incoming surge. Inland rivers are reversing direction near Terra Nova. Bays that were calm earlier are now funneling water backward into narrow inlets. It's not dramatic yet, no full breach, but it's building pressure, like water looking for somewhere to go. On the emergency marine band, I just heard a fragmented alert from Halifax. Evacuation ongoing. Priority elevated areas. Avoid low-lying roadways. Multiple pier failures reported. Wavefront visible from downtown. That was it. Just those sentences. Repeated twice, and then it cut. If the water is visible from the center of Halifax, then this isn't theoretical anymore. It's making landfall. I also received something stranger. A coded ping on a frequency I don't normally monitor. Something in the 89 megahertz range. Wrapped in civilian encryption but with military-style packet headers. I cracked part of it using an old decryption key used during North Atlantic search and rescue drills. It said, "Containment impossible. Ice mass displacement exceeds projection envelope. Phase 2 cascade underway. Recommend inland retreat. Notify downstream assets. Classify under Tetra Event Framework, Level 4. Now, I don't know what Tetra Event means officially. I've never heard that term used in any public NOAA or defense protocol. But Level 4, that's as high as it gets in emergency parlance. That's national collapse scale. That's not just regional flooding. That's something that reshapes coastlines. I don't think they're going to warn the public properly. I think the higher-ups already gave their people a head start. If you're listening to this broadcast from anywhere near sea level, on the East Coast, that includes New York, Boston, Portland, Charleston, even inland spots like Philadelphia and Richmond. If you're near rivers or estuaries, you need to assume that water will not respect your map. This wave doesn't care about your flood barriers or hurricane history. Get above the 200-foot line. Get past natural bottlenecks. The first wave might not be the highest. It's the third, fourth, or fifth that will grind everything flat. Let me paint you a picture. Right now, I'm flying over the Bay du Nord wilderness. Below me, winding rivers normally crawl east toward the coast. They've gone still. That means the ocean has reached far enough to choke off their forward motion. The basin is filling. That water will have nowhere to go but up. And when it spills back into itself, it'll do so with violence. That's how tsunamis rebound in narrow geographies. They hit land, reflect off elevation, and send secondary waves in unnatural directions. That's what happened in Lituya Bay, Alaska, in '58, when a rock slide triggered a localized mega tsunami. That wave reached 1,700 feet, even if only for a few seconds. What's coming now won't be that high, not everywhere, but it will cover more ground. It'll be less like a bullet and more like a glacier with teeth. I keep thinking about what one of the operators on the Quebec band said earlier. He was coordinating with civilian pilots in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, trying to ferry people west. He said, "We're watching the land disappear line by line. The roads are gone before the water even shows up, like it's being erased." That image hasn't left my mind. Watson just shifted in his seat. He does that when we're approaching turbulence, even before the instruments register it. He's picking something up. I check my altimeter, still holding at 4,700. Air pressure's dropping, though. That could mean incoming crosswinds, or that the atmosphere is reacting to mass heat displacement from below. Either way, I'm pulling westward now, cutting toward the interior. I'll pass over the ridgeline near Gambo in 5 minutes. From there, I should be able to pick up any new traffic out of St. John's, if anyone's still on the air. For now, I'll keep this line open. I'm running dual batteries, and the wing repeater's operating clean. To everyone still broadcasting, thank you. Every voice matters. Every signal helps fill the gap the authorities left behind. To those still waiting for orders, don't. Don't wait for press conferences or scrolling alerts. Trust your eyes. Trust your gut. The ocean is not where it's supposed to be. And soon, it won't leave much behind. I can confirm it now. The first towns along the Newfoundland coast are gone. Little Catalina, Melrose, Kings Cove, gone. I flew the edge of the surge less than 15 minutes ago. I didn't intend to. I was trying to cross south of Bonavista and caught the leading edge of the event without warning. It's not like in the movies. There's no wall of water curling and crashing. There's no cinematic moment where you outrun it in a truck. The ocean just lifts. It spreads. And it takes everything. The towns I mentioned were still visible from the air at 9:36 local time. Small, quiet, lined up like usual along the coastal highway. I could see the vehicles parked in driveways. A few people were still walking around, looking east, not running. I think they didn't believe it yet. The water didn't come in with foam and spray. It came in low, silent, and fast, like a black hand across the ground. Within 4 minutes, the streets were submerged. Within 6, rooftops were starting to vanish. I marked the time, the depth, the direction. The water wasn't just flooding, it was replacing the land. There were vessels in the harbor at Kings Cove. Small trawlers, mostly for crab and mackerel. One larger ship was a maintenance barge, probably too slow to make it out in time. I saw it turn sideways, its port bow sucked downward, like the ocean wanted to drag it under. It didn't capsize. It just slid beneath. There are no longer full radio transmissions coming out of the Avalon Peninsula. I'm getting pings from secondary emergency beacons only, automatic signals triggered by battery-powered devices after power loss or immersion. I've tracked 11 of them so far. 3 near Trinity, 2 from the Clarenville docks, and the rest somewhere between Heart's Delight and Chance Cove. That's an entire arc of coastline, wiped out. And it's not just us. I just intercepted an emergency band relay out of the northeastern U.S. A private air traffic controller in Portland, Maine, transmitted a burst-coded message to anyone still receiving VHF. He said, "Casco Bay breach confirmed. Portland jetport flooded. Maritime responders down. Coastline is folding inward. Floodwaters have reached Gorham. Pull everyone inland." Radio silent after this. That message was time-stamped 15 minutes ago. If the floodwaters are that far inland already, we're looking at something far more extensive than even worst-case models predicted. The geography isn't absorbing it. It's collapsing under it. The infrastructure's failing now. Across Newfoundland, the power grid is fracturing by region. I'm watching the lights vanish section by section. Not flicker, vanish. First it was the airport strobes along the northeast corridor. Then came the substation near Clarenville. Saw it from the air, just before it went dark. The backup grid is either overloaded or submerged. Transmission towers are still standing in some areas, but they're just scaffolding now. Tall, powerless silhouettes watching over an ocean that's in the wrong place. I received confirmation that both Port Hawkesbury and Sydney in Nova Scotia are partially underwater. Several ferry crossings have been lost. I repeat, lost, not delayed, not rerouted. Entire ferries are missing from tracking logs. Their AIS beacons vanished around the same time the water pulled back, then rushed in again. There are no rescue craft being launched from the shore. Everyone's pulling back. And it's not just the water. Something's changed in the air. Back over Gambo, the wind picked up sharply from the north. The temperature dropped 4 degrees in under 5 minutes. But it's not a storm front. It's a vacuum, being created by atmospheric displacement. When that much water moves, it drags the air with it. It reshapes the temperature gradient. Birds have vanished. I haven't seen a single seabird since I left the coast. No gulls, no herons, no movement at the tree line. But I did see whales. About 50 miles offshore, earlier this morning, near a low-lying patch of coastal shelf, I spotted something strange. 2 humpbacks, and what I think was a fin whale moving in tandem. Not breaching, not surfacing, just pushing hard westward like they were running. That's not normal behavior. Those animals sense things we don't. They feel pressure shifts before we register them. They weren't swimming to feed. They were fleeing. And there was something else. Just past the fog line, near the southeast corner of the surge path, I saw dorsal fins. Dozens of them. Sharks. I don't know what kind. Too fast. Too erratic to make a clean ID. But they were clustered together like they'd been forced up by something from deeper waters. These weren't open ocean predators migrating early. They were reacting. Everything that lives in the sea knows that something unnatural is moving under it. I also intercepted a garbled signal from an offshore rig support vessel near George's Bank. The ship's name was Castor Bounty. Their report said they lost anchor control and were being pulled sideways, even in what should have been calm seas. Their helideck was swamped. They described water moving not just horizontally but vertically, like pulses or columns pushing upward. That's not a wave. That's a seabed reaction. The Castor Bounty's last transmission ended with a blunt line. We're seeing towers fall inland, trees flattening, not from water, from wind. That's when I realized it's not just the surge, it's the pressure wave. When that much mass hits shallow shelf, it displaces air violently ahead of it, like a natural shockwave. That's probably what's dropping birds mid-flight and tearing trees down before the water even arrives. As I speak now, I've rerouted toward the logging roads west of Gander Lake. There's a fire tower I remember from years ago, an old forestry lookout station with a reinforced base. If it's still standing, I might try to land nearby and set up a longer-range antenna array. The fuel's holding, but I'm burning more than I want to. Watson's still quiet. That's the worst part. He hasn't made a sound in over an hour. Dogs don't go quiet without a reason. I looked down a few minutes ago and saw the edge of Gander. The lights are gone. The airport looks dry, but the terminal's blacked out. No movement on the tarmac. No blinking runway markers. I don't know if anyone stayed. I hope they didn't. We've lost towns. We've lost ships. We've lost connection. And still the water comes. If you're hearing this, and you're still waiting to see something from the government, stop. You won't. Not in time. The systems we built weren't designed for this kind of collapse. Warnings are delayed, if they come at all. By the time you see the ocean rising, it's already too late. Don't think about property. Don't think about roads. Think about elevation. That's all that matters now. If you have a car, drive west. If you have a plane, climb. If you have neither, run uphill and keep running. You're still with me on 7.400 megahertz. This is Rick Danner, and I've just set down about 2 miles west of Gander Lake, not far from an old forestry access road. My Cessna's parked on a half-cleared gravel ridge that used to serve as a supply pad for logging trucks. I'd flown over this spot a few times during engine tests, and remembered the elevation and space might work in a pinch. It's crude, but it held the landing gear. Watson and I are now inside what's left of an abandoned fire tower. The lower level's intact, metal stairs holding, structure steady. The top cabin lost a few windows to weather, but the bones are good. I've rigged a makeshift antenna using copper coil from my secondary transceiver kit and secured it against the frame. Power's coming from a solar rig I installed on the wing 2 years back, with backup from a gel battery I scavenged from a construction site last summer. We're transmitting from higher ground now. The signal should be reaching farther inland. If you're hearing me, good. If you can't respond, keep listening, because the wave hit, and it changed everything. About 20 minutes before I touched down, I had a clean view of Gander Lake stretching east. From altitude, the lake looked smooth as glass. Too smooth. Then came the distortion. Not foam. Not chop. Just a slow bulge, wide as a stadium and rolling in unnaturally from the east end of the water. It reached the southern shore first, curling over the inlet roads. The surge wasn't high, but it was dense. It looked like the surface tension of the lake had been pulled taut, like cellophane stretched over a drum. And then it snapped forward. Trees along the shore went horizontal. Not from water, from the pressure wave. The forest moved like a field of wheat under a heavy wind. Debris was everywhere. Dock parts, roof panels, even what looked like a refrigerator tumbling across the surface like driftwood. Gander itself, from what I could see, is half submerged. The airport's eastern hangars are flooded. The tower's gone black. I saw at least one commercial airliner on the tarmac, unmoved, doors shut. I don't know if anyone was still on board. As I descended, I watched the tail end of the wave's inland reach, a wide tongue of water moving slowly across lowland valleys, following elevation dips like a predator that doesn't need to run. This wasn't a singular wave front. It wasn't like you'd see after an earthquake in the Pacific. This was layered, cascading. The initial surge paved the way, but the following masses of water kept coming, pouring through every gap in the land, backing up rivers, and bursting lake banks. I could see Route 1 glistening under a thin sheet of water. Cars had been abandoned. One box truck had been flipped on its side against the median. A sedan was balanced on a guardrail, its trunk open, no one inside. I flew low once, over the south end of the ridge, before circling back. No motion on the ground, just wreckage and silence. When I shut off the Cessna's engine, the silence was deafening. The wind had gone slack. Not still, just weak, like it had been pushed out of the area by the surge and hadn't returned. Watson stepped out ahead of me, sniffed the air, then backed under the wing and stayed there. That's how I knew the ground was still changing. As I climbed to the tower, the signal traffic changed. No longer distress calls from offshore. Now I was hearing personal relays. Emergency pings from smartphones still powered. Shortwave loops from cabins and hunting lodges. None of them longer than 5 seconds. Most automated. But then one came through, voice and all. It was a man, maybe mid-30s, hard to tell under the static. His signal was weak, bouncing off a compromised repeater tower near the coast. He identified himself only as Matt from Twillingate, and he was trapped on the roof of a fish plant near the harbor. He said, "If anyone hears this," the wave pulled back once but came again, worse. "Everyone that stayed ground level is gone. I can see boats on rooftops, ice in the water. I think it brought part of the shelf with it. I'm 2 stories up, and it's still rising. Please tell someone we're still here." Then a pause. Then, my brother didn't make it. He tried to swim for the grain elevator. Water was moving too fast. I watched him disappear. I tried to respond. I rerouted signal strength, pushed maximum gain through the directional antenna, gave him my call sign and coordinates. No reply. Nothing since. If anyone out there is near Twillingate or can bounce signal off any of the relays in the area, try to reach him. Channel 7.4, manual modulation, voice only. I'll keep broadcasting in case he tunes back in. From up here, the land looks both familiar and wrong. Valleys now shimmer with water that shouldn't be there. The road grid is fractured. The southern slope, leading to Gambo Pond, is completely gone. Prosubmerged. Not just flooded, but eroded. Asphalt ripped off in strips. A bridge half submerged. One end dipped like it was being pulled under. No birds still. No insects either. The air's heavy, but not storm heavy. It's the kind of weight that comes before a deep pressure shift. And the color of the sky? It's wrong. A reddish-gray hue sits low on the eastern horizon, and behind it, you can still see the haze of salt vapor pushing inland. That haze is dangerous. It's not fog. It's saline microparticles suspended in the air, and they conduct electricity. That's likely why so many transformers exploded without warning. If the moisture content gets high enough, we're looking at spontaneous arc flashes. About 20 minutes ago, I watched a substation near Benton Ridge blow. No lightning, no storm, just a bright flash, followed by smoke. The entire area went dark. That kind of failure means the grid's not just offline, it's fried. And that tells me we're not coming back from this quickly. I picked up a brief relay from an amateur operator near Bathurst, New Brunswick. His message was short. Multiple grid failures. St. John dark. Fredericton evac in progress. Moncton overwhelmed. Shelters full. Water in the tunnels. Then nothing. The picture is getting clearer now. This isn't just a wave. It's a continental reset. Where the water goes, the systems fail. Where the systems fail, communication breaks. And once communication goes, people are on their own. If you're inland, anywhere past Grand Falls, Miramichi, Sherbrooke, you may still have time. Don't use that time waiting. Pack fuel, food, blankets, analog tools. GPS will fail. Cell towers are dropping every hour. Get radios, get batteries. And above all, get higher. Because this isn't over. Not by a long shot. From this fire tower, I can see the edge of what used to be the Atlantic. Now it looks like a second ocean, climbing over the land, settling wherever the ground lets it. There's no stopping it. But we can outpace it, if we move now. The first wave hit yesterday. I watched it from the air, then from here, and the damage was beyond what most people can imagine. Coastal towns vanished. Ports were erased. Highways became rivers. And now, just as the water seems to settle into a still, contaminated sprawl, something else is coming. There's a second wave on the move. Smaller, according to reports, at least in terms of height. But that doesn't make it less dangerous. At 3:14, I intercepted a coded emergency bulletin out of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, relayed through a civilian NOAA backup array. The bulletin described secondary displacement, consistent with deep mass glacial collapse and post-fracture slumping. That's a technical way of saying that more of the ice sheet has broken off, not from above, but from below. What the researchers are suggesting is that after the initial quake and primary detachment of the shelf, the remaining structure shifted. Picture a book sliding off a table and dragging the rest with it. This second wave won't hit with the same vertical force as the first. It won't look like a mountain of water, but it will surge farther, deeper, and it'll drag all the wreckage of the first event with it. At around 4:40 this morning, I heard from a field operator near the town of Bishop's Falls, inland from me by a good stretch. He said water had started reversing direction in the Exploits River. Again. He'd seen that happen during the first surge, but now the river had not only reversed, it had risen by another 5 feet. No rainfall, no meltwater upstream. Just a sudden surge from the ocean's return pulse. That's how tsunamis behave. People don't always realize that it's not just one wave. It's a train. The first one is just the announcement. The rest come after, each behaving differently depending on the terrain they strike. And the worst one might not be the first. Yesterday's wave was massive, yes, but it was also fast. What's coming now is slower, denser. The difference is like being hit with a sledgehammer versus being crushed by a glacier. One hits you quick, and you fall. The other just keeps pushing until everything beneath it breaks. The radio chatter confirms it. Evacuees in northern New Brunswick say the water has reached as far as Grand Falls. The bridge over the St. John River there collapsed during the night. Rescue convoys trying to push through were forced to reroute through dirt trails north of Perth Andover. But now, we're getting word that a third wave may be forming, larger than both before it. The first signal came from an underwater seismic array near the Reykjanes Ridge in the North Atlantic, a deep fracture zone south of Iceland. Instruments there showed a sharp spike in subsea floor displacement. About 5 hours later, a subglacial tremor was recorded beneath what remains of the Petermann Shelf. It wasn't a quake, not a sharp event. It was a long, grinding pressure movement, like the ocean floor itself had shifted. Speculation among the scientific community, at least those still managing to relay findings, is that the original ice shelf collapse may have set off a cascade event deep below. Once the weight of that ice was removed, pressure imbalances shifted across the tectonic plate. The ocean floor, especially in regions near fault lines, began to flex. That flexing is what everyone's afraid of now. If the theory's correct, and I'll say again, none of this is fully verified, the sea basin under the Labrador Sea and into the North Atlantic may now be unstable. What started as one fracture could ripple across thousands of square miles. It's like pulling a loose thread on a heavy quilt and watching it unravel itself completely. If enough of the seabed drops or shifts again, the water above it will have nowhere to go but outward. And that's where the third wave comes in. The modeling is incomplete. Nobody has full data, because too many buoys and sensors were destroyed or buried in debris. But the rough estimation, relayed by a senior analyst from the USGS via an encrypted shortwave segment, is that this next wave, expected to arrive within 24 to 36 hours, may be as much as 4 to 5 times the size of the first. Let me repeat that. Not taller necessarily, but heavier, broader, faster, longer. And this time, it won't just be Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, or Maine. Emergency channels out of the eastern seaboard confirm that floodwaters have entered inland portions of Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. As of 1 hour ago, the following statements were issued publicly. State of New York has closed all coastal highways below the Taconic State Parkway and declared mandatory evacuations across all of Long Island and portions of southern Westchester County. Governor's address included the phrase, quote, "This is not storm surge. This is a continental shift." Massachusetts issued martial evacuation authority for all towns east of Interstate 495. Military convoys are now tasked with pushing evacuees west into Springfield and Pittsfield, where hills offer safer elevation. Nova Scotia's Emergency Management Office has declared coastal zones unsalvageable and is instructing all remaining responders to fall back to the Quebecois Mountains. The city of Halifax is confirmed as non-operational. No power, no water, no accessible roads. Newfoundland and Labrador. No new official statements. But I wouldn't expect one. The Provincial Command Center in St. John's has been silent for 14 hours. The last broadcast from there ended with an open channel relay. Water breach in City Hall basement. Generator compromised. Pulling back to backup location. If you hear this, route evacuees northwest. Evacuation routes are being updated constantly by amateur operators. So far, the best confirmed safe routes in Newfoundland are Route 480 from Burgeo up toward Bouchons, Route 370, if you can make it to Badger, without hitting submerged areas, Route 430 north of Deer Lake. Still reports dry as of this morning. If you're in New Brunswick, follow Highway 108 west toward Plaster Rock, then cut north into logging trails near Mount Carlton. That terrain is steep and rough, but it's elevated and mostly forested. Good cover, good drainage. In the U.S., reports suggest I-87 is choked with abandoned vehicles from earlier traffic jams. Avoid it. Secondary highways into the Adirondack Mountains remain open, especially NY30 and NY3 toward Tupper Lake. You want elevation above 600 feet. More, if you can. There's no more time to guess. If what the geologists fear is true, and a full seafloor depression event is underway, then this third wave could be more than catastrophic. It could be transformative. We may be witnessing the beginning of a new coastline, one that pushes inland by miles and stays there. Not a temporary flood, a permanent redrawing of the map. No one's saying that officially, but I've read the subtext in these reports. I've spoken with hydrologists, former Navy sonar operators, amateur radio scientists. They're all seeing the same thing. Patterns that don't end with the water receding. Patterns that show continual forward movement. If the third wave hits, and if it carries as much mass as feared, the salinity, temperature, and pressure of the Atlantic may be altered permanently. That has consequences we haven't even begun to measure. Watson's pacing now. That usually means air pressure is dropping again. I can feel it too. My ears have that familiar pop, like the atmosphere just dipped half a degree in density. From the tower window, I can see more standing water creeping across the valley. It's slower than yesterday, but thicker, mud-laden, full of debris. Not just branches and garbage. Structural wreckage. Somewhere out there, someone is trying to find high ground while dragging the pieces of their old life behind them. I hope they make it. Now I want to say something clearly, while I still have a strong signal. This is no longer a local disaster. It is not isolated to Newfoundland or even the North Atlantic. Whatever this is, whatever chain of events we've set off, it's shifting systems across the Earth. The warnings are here. The data's coming in. And it's not good. This morning, just after sunrise, I picked up a transmission from an amateur relay bouncing through a British repeater. A voice, possibly from Wales, said they'd lost contact with Liverpool at 4:22. Not spotty reception, not partial flooding, gone. The River Mersey had surged backward, breaching the city's protective seawall system, and then some kind of pressure wave collapsed a section of the Queensway Tunnel. The man, I never caught his name, said the city center looked like it had been scooped out by an invisible hand. Debris everywhere. Underground parking garages flooded to the ceiling. I confirmed his report through another channel about 30 minutes later. A civilian operator in Manchester passed along a broadcast snippet, pulled from a local emergency radio that played once, then went dark. It ended with, "Evacuation toward the Pennines. Recommended. Coastal containment impossible. Southern rail lines submerged." That's not just England. That's the United Kingdom's northwest transportation grid gone in under 12 hours. France is worse. Shortwave snippets picked up last night. And again this morning, say Le Havre was hit hard by the first surge, and completely overwhelmed by the second. The Seine River surged backward into Rouen. a steel freight bridge, buckled under the weight of debris and collapsed into the flood. There are unconfirmed reports that portions of Normandy are now partially underwater, not flooded, but fully replaced by a shallow inland sea. I couldn't believe it at first, but the tone of those who sent the messages, they didn't sound surprised. They sounded resigned. And then, from Spain, I picked up a marine navigation bulletin pushed via old civilian GPS satellite systems. A redirection alert intended for shipping vessels near Galicia, warning them to divert immediately. That alert referenced unexpected tectonic rebound under the Bay of Biscay. Tectonic rebound. The phrase came up again in a voice transmission from a retired hydroacoustic technician, broadcasting out of Reykjavik. His theory, and it's just that, a theory, is that the original ice shelf collapse created a rebound effect on the sea floor. Think of it like pressing down on a sponge and then letting go. The release causes secondary deformation. In this case, the release of pressure may be causing the North Atlantic basin to lift and shift. He believes we've essentially triggered a massive, natural oscillation, a swinging of Earth's crust in that region. Not a single event, but a continuous, compounding one. The worst part? That movement isn't limited to one region. Reports are coming in now, from the South Atlantic. Portions of Brazil's southern coastline, Porto's city of Porto Alegre, are now seeing saltwater intrusion up the Guaíba River. That's hundreds of miles inland. A region with no history of tsunami risk is now facing a slow, tidal surge, pushing upriver against gravity. Rivers all over the world are behaving like they've been reversed. The Amazon recorded an unusual surface swell last night near Santarém. The data doesn't match rainfall or wind systems. Hydrologists suspect it's being influenced by slight changes in global water displacement, as if the oceans themselves have shifted enough to subtly nudge river basins in the other hemisphere. In West Africa, messages from operators in Dakar describe strange tidal patterns and long-range vibrations that cause shoreline cracks and sediment collapse. That means the Earth itself, the plate structure beneath the Atlantic, may be flexing in ways we don't fully understand. Not breaking, flexing. A geologist in Iceland compared it to deep breath events the planet sometimes takes after large-scale glacial movements. Normally, this happens over centuries. He thinks it's happening in real time. In Greenland itself, well, we don't know, because no one's gotten a clean signal out of there in over 36 hours. I'll tell you what I think. I think the fracture in the shelf was just the ignition point. The real collapse is slow, buried under miles of ice and water. As the deep foundation gives way, it sets off a chain reaction of small but widespread seafloor deformations. And every time that happens, it pushes a new ripple outward. Not all those ripples will be tall enough to be called waves. Some will come as pressure changes, some as slow currents, some as land-based erosion. But all of them will reshape the map. The third wave, the one I talked about yesterday, might already be forming. This morning, a sensor buoy out near the Flemish Cap, east of Newfoundland, recorded the sea level rising nearly 2 feet in less than 4 minutes. That doesn't sound like much, until you remember the scale. A rise like that at depth suggests an underwater dome of displacement, the beginning of something pushing upward. We don't yet know if this is part of the third wave or the start of a fourth. But one thing is now clear. The Earth didn't just react to the ice collapse. It adjusted, and we're all feeling that adjustment. Closer to home, rivers aren't behaving properly anymore. The Exploits River, here in Newfoundland, has surged backward again. It now carries salt water into areas that were once fresh. Fishermen from Red Indian Lake, or what's left of it, say the water tastes wrong, smells metallic, and moves too slow for how full it is. It's thick, heavy, and directionless. And it's not just rivers. Streams, ponds, even groundwater tables are shifting. The whole hydrology of this region is being warped. And if that's happening here, it's likely happening everywhere. I've also heard stories from Alaska. A ham operator in Haines said the Chilkat River surged 2 feet overnight, though no rain had fallen in days. The sea smelled hot. His words, like old iron and salt on a stove. That's a smell you only get when deep-sea minerals get pulled upward and out into open air. There's no full consensus yet, but the pattern is clear. What we thought was a coastal event is actually a planetary one. A redistribution of water, a shifting of crust, a wake-up call on a geologic scale. If you're inland, do not assume you're safe just because the first waves passed. Groundwater may rise. Flooding may come from unexpected directions. Rivers may betray their own courses. This is not a singular disaster. This is a sequence, and no one knows where it ends. It's just gone 4 o'clock local time, Newfoundland, and the sun should be slanting low over the ridge behind me, except there's no sun anymore. Just a wall of gray stacked so high, it looks like the sky's been replaced with slate. That's not normal weather. Not in this region. It's building like a storm system. Yes, but it's not rotating. Not rolling in from the west or pushing in from the south. It's rising, pulling up from the coastline, as if the air itself is being lifted by the next wave. If you're still listening, wherever you are, you need to know the next pulse is coming. We don't have a timestamp. There is no early warning radar, no sirens. But all signs suggest the third wave has begun forming, and unlike the last two, this one might not stop at the shoreline. Around midday, I picked up a relay chain, bouncing through what's left of the U.S. Eastern grid. Originating point was somewhere near Pittsburgh. The message was short, clipped, possibly automated, but one phrase stood out. Western Appalachians confirmed as emergency line. Coastal system collapse imminent. That's not just a warning to get away from the water. That's a suggestion to retreat beyond entire mountain ranges. I don't think we're dealing with a storm front anymore. I think we're looking at atmospheric instability being driven by mass oceanic motion. That's a fancy way of saying the air's being pulled inland, by the vacuum effect of the ocean floor shifting again. And sure enough, the sky above me is thickening, but not like a thunderstorm. There's no heat, no static charge, no smell of ozone, just pressure. A kind of barometric heaviness you can feel in your teeth. Even Watson's gone into a corner of the tower and curled up. He hasn't moved in 20 minutes. He's not asleep. He's bracing. About an hour ago, I got one last clean contact from a weather technician working out of a backup site near Montjoly, Quebec. He said radar loops were showing an oceanic pulse larger than the previous two, not in height, but in volume. Imagine a freight train versus a bulldozer. One hits hard, the other just keeps coming. He estimated, based on water temperature shifts and long-range swell propagation, that the third wave was already moving across the deeper shelf and would hit the Gulf of St. Place. Lawrence by late tonight or early morning. His words, "This one won't stop at the coastline. It'll move up the valleys. It'll roll over the lowlands like syrup over rock." Then his signal died. Not from water, from power loss. The backup relay failed about 15 minutes after he signed off. Now, the last I heard from the Eastern Atlantic came from a marine weather station on the Azores. The operator there relayed something I hadn't heard before. He said deep-sea temperature anomalies were registering in real time. Water from below, sediment-rich, oxygen-depleted, and normally locked under layers of current, cacti-s, was rising toward the surface faster than models could track. That water isn't warm, it's not clean, and it's dense. He believes this third wave is being driven not by surface wind or glacial melt, but by massive undersea displacement, possibly a collapse of sediment walls along the continental rise. If that's true, we may be watching a literal reshaping of the seafloor in motion. That also explains why so much of the coastal atmosphere feels off. The air temperature has dropped again here by almost 6 degrees Celsius in the last hour. No cloud movement. Just a still, oppressive ceiling overhead. The sun is gone completely now. There's a taste in the wind I don't recognize. Not brine, not rust. Something bitter and metallic, like standing near an old copper boiler. I've read that in rare events, when deep-sea water breaks the thermocline, it can vent minerals and methane trapped under pressure. That might be what's entering the air now. That would also explain the headaches I've had since noon, and the dizziness I can't quite shake. I've opened the vents to keep the tower aired out, but I'm watching Watson carefully. If he starts coughing, I'm getting out. Across the continent, systems are failing in sequence. I received a scrambled relay from a man broadcasting out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He said the Mississippi River has reversed at multiple bends south of Natchez. Not tidal surge, not rain, river reversal. And worse, saltwater intrusion has moved 60 miles upstream in under a day. Entire municipal water systems are being compromised. That's one of the largest river systems in North America behaving like it doesn't know which way to run. And it's not alone. The Hudson, the Potomac, the Delaware, the St. Lawrence, all of them are experiencing what hydrologists are calling negative gradient events. That means the ocean has pushed in so far, it's overtaken gravity. There are entire towns now with rivers flowing the wrong way. I also picked up a voice contact from a Canadian ranger team on snowmobiles near the Labrador interior. They'd been helping evacuees move up through the Mealy Mountains, said they encountered something they couldn't explain. A standing forest of pines, mature, over 40 years old, all toppled in the same direction, not torn down by wind, uprooted, as if from underneath. No crater, no visible cause, just trees pushed over by a force beneath the soil. They think the land shifted. Slowly, but enough. That tracks with what I'm seeing now. On the ridge west of the tower, I noticed earlier that the trees are leaning slightly. Not enough to fall, but enough to notice the vertical lines aren't true anymore. Something is tilting the terrain. If the seafloor is shifting enough to push waves this far inland, then the crust under us is moving too. And maybe that's why so many of these weather patterns make no sense. Why the storms are forming backward. Why the fog arrives without heat. Why the rivers run wrong. Because the foundation has slipped, and no one's sure where it's going to settle. I've heard a rumor, and I don't normally share rumors on this channel, but this one's coming from 3 independent sources, all in different countries. There's talk of a 4th wave, one that's forming not in the Atlantic but in the Southern Ocean off the coast of Antarctica. There are no confirmed observations, but satellites, those still functioning, have begun tracking low-pressure anomalies near the Ross Sea, paired with sudden, unexpected vertical swell data. If this is true, we may have started a global domino effect. The release of one massive ice mass shifted the balance just enough to ripple tectonic structures across hemispheres. One piece falls, then another, until the ocean starts behaving like one giant connected pulse. I don't know what comes next, but I do know the 3rd wave is still out there. It hasn't hit us yet, but it's moving. And this time, we won't see it as a wall of water. We'll feel it in the ground, in the air, in the silence that comes before everything gives way. This is Rick Danner, now mobile again. I've left the fire tower. The generator failed at 4:38 this morning, and the battery backup gave me a few extra hours. But with signal strength degrading and cloud cover thickening, I had no choice. I packed the transceiver, both antennas, and a rigged power cell, and loaded them into the Cessna. Watson and I lifted off from the old gravel strip just before dawn. We're flying low now, following the edge of the ridgeline. I'm keeping the signal going while I can, because something is happening, and I don't know if we're going to see another sunrise. The 3rd wave has started. I can't see it the way I saw the first. It's not a singular surge. It's not a visible wall of water racing toward the land. This one is broader, heavier, distributed like a slow hand, pressing across the surface of the earth. I first noticed it from the air, just after takeoff. The river valleys were already flooded, but something had changed in their motion. Instead of following the natural curve of the land, the water was curling around the hills, climbing over low ridges, and spreading in directions that made no sense. Then I saw the land move. Not collapse, not quake. It shifted. A section of forested slope near Mount Peyton just tilted. Trees swayed, then bent, then fell, all at once, as if the entire ridge had been pushed forward from underneath. There was no explosion, no sound, just the slow surrender of land that could no longer hold itself upright. I pulled west, trying to gain altitude, but the air above the tree line was unstable. Something's changed in the upper atmosphere. The clouds aren't behaving like normal cumulus. They're stacked in layers, flat and wide, with no discernible rotation. It looks like fog, but it moves against the wind. I tried to bank south, but the headwind was too strong. Ended up pushing back northwest, where the weather was thinner. I'm now near the valley between Badger and Bukins. From up here, I can see pockets of standing water stretching for miles, reflecting light like a shattered mirror. The roads are gone. Bridges are gone. The grid is dark. I made contact briefly with an operator outside Edmundston, New Brunswick. He said the St. John River has overtopped every levee from Grand Falls to Fredericton. Floodwaters are now reaching the edges of the Appalachian foothills. The second wave hit hard, but the third one, the one now, is different. It's not smashing things. It's lifting them, sliding them. He described watching an entire barn, intact, float past him at eye level, on a sheet of black water. Then he said something that stuck with me. This isn't a flood anymore. This is a migration. And he's right. The water isn't receding. It isn't draining. It's moving inland, permanently. Every emergency channel I can still reach says the same thing. Retreat is no longer a matter of hours or minutes. It's already too late for most of the lower river towns. There's no cavalry coming, no rescue helicopters, no National Guard columns rolling in from the highway. The infrastructure was built for storms, not for this. Last night, before I shut down the tower transmitter, I received a chain message from 3 ham relays out of Europe. The Netherlands has issued a full withdrawal from coastal zones. The seawalls have failed. The Maas River surged backward through Rotterdam and is now flowing north toward inland farming territory. Amsterdam's subway system was lost within 3 hours of the first surge. Belgium has shut down its entire North Sea industrial corridor. The port of Antwerp is offline. The Scheldt River has become a saltwater inlet. Denmark's western coast is silent. The North Sea surge there coincided with what local scientists are calling an unexpected atmospheric inversion, pushing pressure and water deeper inland than models predicted. There's been nothing out of Iceland since 2 a.m., and Greenland's been completely silent for 2 days. But the one that broke me was a signal from Tokyo. Yes, Tokyo. A relay caught through 3 satellite bounces and a degraded VHF burst, possibly from a vessel in the Pacific. It was short, less than 30 seconds, but it was clear. The voice said, "This is JS Atago, broadcasting final report. Sea levels rising west of Chiba. Subduction shelf destabilizing. Standing by for..." The signal ended mid-sentence. Japan isn't anywhere near the Atlantic, but it's feeling this. Somehow, the shift is global. If the speculation is right, and I think it is, then the removal of pressure from the collapsed glacial shelf triggered crustal rebound, not just under Greenland, but across adjacent plates. That rebound sent energy deep into the mantle, where tension redistributed across multiple tectonic fault lines. It's like pressing down on one side of a sponge and watching the other bulge. But in this case, the sponge is the planet. Some regions are rising, others are sinking, and all of them are drowning. I'm seeing it here, from the air, from the ground. The lake systems are connecting in ways they never did before. Low-lying fields have become wetlands. Former rivers are now arms of the sea, and it's still moving. The third wave is not a wave at all. It's a tide that never ends. I tried landing once, west of Bushans. Flat terrain, decent clearance. But the ground was too soft, saturated. I aborted. Circling again now, looking for another option. Fuel's not infinite. I have one reserve canister and one more clean filter for the purifier. Watson's awake, alert. He's been staring at the western sky for 20 minutes. He can sense it. Maybe he understands more than I do. There are people still out here. I've seen them. Cars parked in clusters on elevated ridges. Smoke from campfires. Tarps strung between trees. Survivors moving westward with what they can carry. I don't know if they've heard what's coming. I don't know if I should tell them, because I don't have answers anymore. Just signal. And sky. And the sound of water climbing behind us. This is Rick Danner, transmitting from the edge of what used to be the interior. There's no more coastline now. There's only higher ground. If you can reach it, go. If you're already there, stay. And if you're listening, hold fast. Because the next sound we hear may be the land settling for the last time. Some repeater still holds a charge. Some tower still stands upright above the waterline. Some fragment of antenna is doing its job, while the world drowns quietly beneath it. I'm not in the air anymore. I set the Cessna down on a logging road west of Badger late last night. Fuel was low, visibility was shot, and the headwinds were too strong to safely continue toward the foothills. I found a high stretch of ground where the asphalt was split but dry, and put her down by moonlight. Watson and I spent the night inside the fuselage. This morning, I pulled the transceiver and antenna gear, hiked a mile uphill, and found what's left of a ranger's radio shed tucked into a boulder face, built decades ago and long abandoned. Its solar panels shattered, roof partially collapsed. But the walls are thick, the elevation is high, and the ridgeline offers open line of sight westward. That's where I'm broadcasting from now. Probably for the last time. The third wave crested overnight. Not in one motion. Not like a tsunami you'd see in a satellite loop. It came in stages. Like the ocean, exhaling in heavy, uneven breaths. First came a sudden air pressure drop, sharp, deep enough to cause ringing in my ears. Then the mist, a wall of saline vapor pushing uphill like smoke, dense enough to blur the treetops and muffle every sound, except the creaking of trunks under their own weight. Then, without warning, the horizon changed color. A silver-gray glare, reflecting off what should have been hills and forest floor. It wasn't just rain. It was light bouncing off a surface that wasn't there before. Water. Everywhere. What used to be valleys and ridges had become a mirror. I climbed to the ridge just before first light, and what I saw, it wasn't destruction. It was erasure. There are no towns anymore between Grand Falls and Gambo. No roads you can follow without crossing running water. No dry fields. No bridges. Just an inland sea with hills like islands, tree canopies like ripples in a dark green tide, and the faint outlines of rooftops poking from what used to be neighborhoods. Watson didn't bark. He didn't pace. He just sat beside me, staring quietly into the water. I think he understood, maybe better than I did. I tried reaching the Gander relay. Nothing. I tried the Clarenville Tower. Dead. I sent a ping to Deer Lake. No return. I don't think there's a single full repeater still functioning in Newfoundland, east of Corner Brook. The silence is worse than anything else. Even the birds have stopped. The wind picks up sometimes, curling through the tops of the drowned trees, but there's no bird song, no engine hum, no voices. Just the occasional crack of a branch as something collapses beneath the surface. I've received only a handful of signals in the last 12 hours. One came from a rail crew stuck in the highlands north of the Quebec border. They said a derailment forced them to take shelter in a tunnel, but now the water is rising on both ends. They've rigged solar lights and pulled everything they can to the central chamber, but they don't know how much longer they can stay. Another came from a civilian pilot near the White Mountains of New Hampshire. She said the valleys were flooding from both ends, one from river surge, the other from the Atlantic. She tried to get her family to safety by following the mountain ridge west, but was forced to ditch in a pasture when the weather turned. Her last words before signal loss: "We thought we were far enough. There is no far enough." And then, this morning, a signal that broke me. A voice out of Scotland. A woman. Soft, tired, calm. She said she was the last one left in a broadcast tower near Fort William. Everything around her was underwater. She described how the locks had overtopped their basins, how the sea had found new inlets through the highlands. "I'm still here," she said. "I'm still talking." She asked if anyone could hear her. I answered. I don't know if she received it. I repeated my call sign, told her I was with her, that someone was listening. The line held for 22 seconds, then silence. I don't know if she made it, but I won't forget her voice. There's talk now of a fourth wave. The Pacific has begun showing similar patterns. Pressure sensors near the Mariana Trench are recording subduction anomalies. Tremors have been felt along the coast of Chile and even inland Bolivia. In Africa, the Congo River, one of the largest on the planet, has reversed direction in 3 of its southern tributaries. Australia is reporting seawater flooding portions of the outback, funneled through dry creek beds by ocean, wind, and tide flow unlike anything on record. The entire globe is moving, adjusting. The water we displaced when the Peterman Shelf broke loose didn't just move west, it moved everywhere. It sloshed, surged, curled beneath and over itself. It found weaknesses in the crust and pushed them wider. Now the Earth is trying to rebalance itself, and none of us are standing on steady ground anymore. I want to tell you what it looks like here, because this is the part no satellite can show you. The water isn't clear. It's a thick, gray-black, filled with silt and crushed vegetation. It flows sluggishly but with unstoppable pressure, like slow lava. Roads are ghosts beneath it, visible only when the light hits right. You can see rooftops still barely holding above the surface, shingles torn off, gutters bent sideways. I saw a church steeple disappear just after sunrise. It sank slowly, no splash, just slipped under and was gone. And there are things floating, objects, pieces of homes, vehicles, and sometimes bodies. I try not to look too long. I try not to describe it. But you need to know, because this is not a movie. It's not science fiction. It's what happens when the Earth shifts and no one listens. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a soldier. I'm just a stubborn old man with a dog, a radio, and a lifetime of watching the skies. I was supposed to retire 3 years ago. Sell the hangar. Fly less. Let go. But I kept going. And now, here I am. On a ridgeline that wasn't supposed to be the coast, talking into a signal that might be the last anyone hears from this part of the world. If you're listening from Europe, I hope you're high. If you're west of the Rockies, stay there. If you're in South America, move inland. If you're on an island, I hope you have elevation. If you're anywhere near the sea, remember, this isn't over. And it may not be for years. There is no plan. There is no recovery timeline. This isn't about rebuilding yet. It's about surviving. And that means staying dry, staying quiet, and staying connected. Even if you're only talking to ghosts. If you're still here, you're part of the next chapter. Whatever comes next, whether we adapt, or scatter, or vanish entirely, it begins with those who are still listening. You're not alone. Not as long as someone's still broadcasting. This is Rick Danner, former aviation tech, pilot, observer, and voice of a place that's no longer on the map. I don't know how long this battery will last. I don't know if this ridge will stay dry, but I'll talk until I can't. I'll listen until I can't. And I'll believe, even now, that someone out there is still trying.